Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing great. For those of you who are new here, my name is Jackie, and I'm an evolutionary whole house Western astrologer. Kind of throw all of those buzzwords in there so that you know that you're watching a Western whole house forecast. For this particular read, we're going to focus on Neptune, and I'm also going to be addressing Neptune conjuncting Pluto for like the next forever. But you do have to know your rising sign. So if you are kind of newish to astrology, you want to first and foremost understand that your rising sign, that would be the sign that's on your first house in your birth chart. That is your rising sign. The planet that rules that rising sign, that particular astrological sign, is your chart ruler. If you don't know your chart, as long as you know your exact time of birth, you can use any free birth chart calculator. If you don't know the exact time of your birth, but you do know, obviously, your birthday, your mother and or father's name, whoever was in your, orb when you were born, as well as the hospital and the city and state that you were born in. I know a lot of times, even if hospitals burn down, there are records. So you can just contact the local Department of Records for the area, could do it all online. It's easy peasy, I promise. For like 25 bucks, you want to order a long form birth chart, birth report, birth certificate. Hello. Okay. You want to make sure that you're either saying indicating long form or form with time. Because if you just order your birth chart, your birth certificate, and this goes for Europe as well, for those of you who are tuning in from other countries, they usually just give you like a basic without the time. And it's kind of frustrating. It's like, all right, well, that's not helping me. So just make sure that you're ordering it with the time. Okay. I get so many emails having to do with that. I understand a lot of people just our parents pass on at a certain point. It's like, where the hell is my birth certificate? Good luck. I have no idea. So it's actually not that difficult because these things are actually kept in records, unless obviously you have a very unique kind of circumstance where perhaps you were born at home and there was a lot of, extenuating circumstances. But anyway, that is how you want to really be looking at that ascendant. Second to that, you want to be looking at your sun and then your moon, okay, for all of the fullest messages. But our rising sign, that first house, drives and defines your birth chart. And it really does speak the most to your day-to-day experience. But the sun is very connected to our joy, our happiness, our career. It's very important as well. Our ego consciousness, it's very important as well. But when it comes to astrological forecast, you want to understand that it's based on the time that you were born and the sign that's in your first house. So, for example, I'm June 6th, right? I'm a Gemini sun. My sun is in the sixth house. So I'm a Gemini sun. I experience the lens through which I experience my sun sign is the sign of Virgo because Virgo is the landlord of the sixth house. However, because my sun is in the sixth house, the first house has Capricorn on it. So I am a Capricorn rising. So that's the first thing that I consider. And then second to that, I consider my sun, my Gemini sun. And then I even look at Virgo sun because I experience my sun energy through the lens of the sixth house. I hope I didn't confuse anyone. You could stop this, play it back, whatever. I don't want to confuse you, but I really try to give you guys the most direct messages so that you could get the fullest and most accurate forecast on this very public general platform. So, with all that being said, let's talk about Neptune. Now, I did speak about Neptune in the March reading, but I wanted to break it out. And I did mention, I guess I mentioned briefly, I don't really remember mentioning it because sometimes I don't remember, but a lot of you have been reaching out to me asking for more specifics on this Neptune transit. This is a big one. It went into Aries on March 30th. It's going to be in there. It's a 14-year transit. It's going to be in there for 14 years until 2039. But why is this a big transit? Well, yes, it's a 14-year change, right? It's been in Pisces, the oldest sign that lives in the 12th house. which means that this transitioning into Aries, which is the landlord of the first house, is officially ending a 160-year cycle. Okay, so that's a big deal. It's starting a brand spanking new trip around the zodiac. So, among other things that are going on with Pluto and Uranus and all of these other energies this year, this is very important to note because it is a completely different energy than Pisces. Okay, so let me just lay out some pragmatics, right? We're going to talk about Neptune. We're going to talk about Aries. We're going to extensively discuss Aries because all of this energy, you're going to be experiencing it in whatever house your Aries is in. I'm going to tell you what house your Aries is in. As long as you know your rising sign, you don't have to check because I'm going to tell you. So we're going to talk about Neptune. We're going to talk about Aries. We're going to go through what each of the rising signs, what part of your life and what it means to have this experience. I'm going to end the video talking about Neptune retrograde. The reason why I want to have this discussion is because since Neptune is on the move, and he is on the move because he's not totally settled in Aries now. On July 4th, he's going to be going retrograde until October, but he's going to be retrograding in the meantime back into the sign of Pisces, where he had been for 14 years, right? So we're going to have like that, from July 4th to October, it's going to be retrograde. In that retrograde season, it's going to be dipping back into Pisces until January 26th of 2026. So you don't have to worry about that right now. I'm going to be doing other videos about that, but he's not totally set and settled, right? So we have to understand that when we have this experience, we went through it with Pluto, we're going to go through it now with Neptune, and we're going to go through it with Uranus, even Saturn, we're going to go through it with, where we have to understand that wherever these planets live in our birth chart is also going to be rocked, okay? And when I say rocked, that does not mean a bad thing. It could be a really good thing. With Neptune, it could be very creative, very dreamy. Dreams could be coming true. But we are going to discuss how Neptune has two very distinct, different sides. And this is a long transit. So we can have it manifest in the light version and then in the darker version throughout the course of that 14 years. But if you know in your birth chart that you have Neptune retrograde, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. You are going to be challenged like nobody's business, especially over the next 2 years, to undo that retrograde. Now, we can undo it like, oh, if I really think about it, I'm just going to undo it. No. What do? We can never get rid of that through progressions and stuff. And I don't want to confuse anybody. We can have different experiences. But the onus is on us to understand our own retrogrades and to understand that we have the power to shine light on these things where we can't seem to get out of our own way and make the changes. You have beautiful energy. Like unbelievably beautiful energy to really unpack life confusion. Where am I? What is it all about? That's very kind of like Neptune retrograde. So if you know you have Neptune retrograde, I'm going to explain in full detail what Neptune retrograde is at the end of the video. So first I'm going to go through all of the energies and then I'm going to end with that. But so let's start unpacking. What is the dealio with this? Again, March 30th of this year until 2039, 14 years. That retrograde period again is going to be from July 4th all the way to October 22nd of 2025. It does go back into Aries on January 26th of 2026. Additionally, Neptune's not only in Aries, but Neptune has been doing a very funny sextile with Pluto since around World War II. So they've kind of been doing this very funny sextile kind of dance together. And, when we're looking at these energies, it really is about trying to balance this idea of passion, what we feel very passionate about, and balancing it out with the idea of compassion and what that means, right? creativity and the need to letting go of martyring tendencies, victim tendencies, the ability to be victimized, the tendency to victimize other people, letting go of the past. And I mean, having Pluto in Aquarius and Neptune in Aries, those two signs, because Pluto's rather new in Aries, as we've discussed a bunch of times before. So this is going to be a very different kind of experience. But guys, I do want to say, like, the thesis of that particular sextile is there is a reason why when we drive our car, the rear view mirror is so much smaller than the windshield. The windshield is what we look through to move forward. The rear view mirror is what we're looking at to see what's behind us, right? It's time to let that go. And it's time to truly focus forward. Sometimes we can't forget what's behind us, but go through it, take the lessons, throw out the other stuff. Seriously, there's no value add. And that's the important point. That's the delineating factor. You have to ask yourself, what value add is holding on to that relationship that didn't work out, where I felt taken advantage of and used in that family situation, whatever it is. But looking at, yes, it happened. Now you have control over really avoiding allowing yourself to get into those situations moving forward. But holding on to that exact experience that happened already behind you, no bueno. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Okay. So that's going to be the impact of this sextile. Obviously, it's going to be impacting everybody a little differently. And I will mention that as we go along. Because I kind of want to get into discussing the signs right now. Now, let me just kind of front load this by reminding each of you, depending on your ascendant, what house Neptune is in and what house Pluto is in. And that's where those two houses are going to be experiencing this sextile, this idea of needing to revamp, needing to let go. It's time to update wherever Pluto is. And Neptune is a very victimized energy. We're going to talk again. We're going to unpack Neptune a little more deeply in a moment, but I just want you to understand the two houses that it's working between. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick run through of all the signs, and then I'm going to just break it down into each of the signs. I'm going to have the timestamps really begin there. All right, let's get started. Aries friends, our Aries friends, Neptune is going to be in your first house. Pluto is in your 11th house. The first house is the path that you're walking on. Fresh path, new perspective. 11th house has to do with goals and gains. It has to do with technology. It has to do with everything that we've been talking about connected to Pluto, guys. Those of you who are watching me, we've been doing a lot of discussing about that. But it's between houses 1 and 11. That's the sextile. But this Neptune transit in Aries is hitting you guys front and center, right in that first house, right? And we're going to unpack that extensively for you guys. Then we have our Taurus friends. Taurus, Neptune is in your 12th house of the hidden. Pluto is in the 10th house of your long-term goals, your career, your public reputation, your standing in the world, as well as the manifestation of mother energies, okay? Gemini's got Neptune transiting in that 11th house for the next 14 years. Pluto is in the 9th house. Beautiful house for Pluto to be in, having to do with change and transformation in your area of growth, higher education, higher mindedness, publishing, marketing, advertising, travel. Cancer, Neptune is in your 10th house. That Pluto energy is in your 8th house. Big period of change for you guys, absolutely. So Neptune rather, is going to be in your 10th house of career, public reputation, standing in the world. And that 8th house is Pluto is in his domicile there, right? He's the modern ruler of the 8th house. Change and transformation when it comes to other people's money, debt, taxes, sex, intimacy, as well as deep and profound connections, right? Leo. Neptune is going to be transiting in your 9th house for the next 14 years, and Pluto is in the 7th house for you guys. We will talk about that. Virgo, Neptune is in your 8th house, Pluto is in your 6th house. Libra, Neptune is in your seventh house of marriage, contracts, relationships, your energetic output at work. And Pluto is in your fifth house of children, joy and happiness, relationships, monetizable talents, taking a chance on things. Scorpio, Neptune is doing a transit through your sixth house of health, daily responsibilities, as well as your daily work environment, as well as your pets, right? All our domestic fur babies. Pluto energy is in your fourth house of home, property, real estate, your inner base of operations, as well as your first family. Sag, fifth house energy is where Neptune is for you. That has to do with children, your joy, creative endeavors. That third house, Pluto energy, is where that sextile is happening for you. So there is going to be a lot of creativity going on for you guys and a lot of revisiting how it is exactly that you communicate with people in your life. Capricorn, fourth house energy. Fourth house is where Neptune is going to be traveling for the next 14 years. It's property, home, real estate. That should be a lot of fun when Saturn goes in there. Okay. Can't wait to see what ends up happening there. And then Pluto energy is in the second house of the money you make from the work that you do, your sense of self, your self-esteem, as well as your internal bodily health. Aquarius. Neptune transiting your third house, Pluto's in the first house. You know, Aquarius, we've been talking about it, big changes. This Neptune energy is going to be super important for you guys to really focus in on, okay? Just trying to watch your six. I want you guys to be okay. Nobody taking advantage of you when it comes to communication. We will unpack that. And finally, our Pisces friends, that Neptune energy. Yes, you love Neptune. Neptune is your ruler, right? This is in your second house, the money you make from the work that you do, your sense of self, self-esteem. And you know, because Pluto is two houses away in your 12th house, I feel like for a lot of you, you're going to be doing a lot of unpacking and a lot of working through ancestral patterning and really letting go of like that ancestral stuff that just does not serve you anymore. Okay, guys, so with no further ado, as they say, whatever, I'm going to get started on discussing Neptune. Let's just sort of deeply unpack who he is. He is the planet of mysticism and this idea of at oneness. It represents both the blissful and at one-ment, you know, being at one with the universe, being at one with spirit, as well as confusion. Not knowing limits, not knowing boundaries. And the reason is this. If you understand that Neptune rules Pisces, and Pisces is the twin fish going in opposite directions, okay? One fish is going up and the other fish is going down. But there's a twin energy to them, right? So it's like the other side of each other. One is unconditionally loving and giving. It's the energy of the nurse. It's the energy of I love you just because I love you. It's the energy of prisons and rehabs. And you're like, oh my gosh, prison. Well, what are we doing? What are we supposed to be doing in prison? We're supposed to be rehabilitating. We're supposed to be surrounded by people. And I know this doesn't happen in our current prison system, unfortunately, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this is what it represents. It's this place of rehabilitation to become better while you're also getting help, though, right? It's this idea of being able to get some help in some sort of way. So a drug rehab, a physical rehab, anything like that, right? With the 12th house energy, you know, this Neptune energy is as the ruler of the 12th house, is very connected to our subconscious, is very connected to disease and dis-ease, things that we can't see. So there is a lot of connection to anxiety, depression, and illnesses that we can't quite see that are being hidden. That are hidden. So we have to understand that straight out of the gate. But Neptune, as the ruler of the 12th house, also rules sleep. Very connected to our emotions because Neptune is the ruler of the bottomless ocean, right? Oh, so it's very difficult for us to feel very grounded and really understand boundaries wherever Neptune is. And there could be some goodness to that because there can be so much untapped energy and untapped talents that we don't even realize we have that that will be manifesting, particularly in a fire energy like Aries, coming to the forefront, realizing that we're good at stuff that we maybe kind of knew, but we didn't really realize how good, or maybe we thought we might be, or maybe we thought we would never be good at something, and we end up being good at it because it's very creative. It's very connected to what it is that we ultimately wish for, dreams, right? So anything that's very like dreamy and ethereal and fantasy and creative, it's great. But what happens when we have a little too much of that, a little too much? I love you no matter what. You got to be careful. Not that we should put limits, but we have to have boundaries. Otherwise, there's one thing to be unconditionally loving and giving, and there's another thing being a doormat. Two totally different stories, right? So we have this unconditional loving and giving, but don't be a doormat. Because if you just don't understand the boundaries of what's fair and healthy in that part of your life, you have to understand that it's very easy for you to be taken advantage of, right? That's why Neptune also rules addictions. Now, take pretty much anything: alcohol, pills, sex, shopping. You take anything in life, right? Anything in life. A little bit is not going to hurt you. I mean, obviously it depends on what kind of drug you would be taking. Because if it's fentanyl, yes, it can. And I'm sorry if anyone out there has had a loved one with any sort of experience, is that's horrible. But it's really just to say that addiction is, something that's taken to the nth degree, right? Where it's not just a little, it's too much. And this is what happens when Neptune is in the house. We take it beyond what is good for us. We take it beyond because we don't understand boundaries. We just don't. It's like I always say, right? It's like Neptune energy is like trying to look at reality through a thick fog or a dirty window, right? You kind of know it's there, but not really. So it's very important for us to understand that boundary creation is not natural for us whenever Neptune is transiting a house or wherever it lives in our chart. So there can be this confusion. What am I supposed to be doing? Where am I going? I'm not sure. That's a thing, right? So we have to understand that we have to create those boundaries. Otherwise, we could become the victim of something. We can end up sick. We can end up with serious imbalances, being taken advantage of, right? So there is that dark element that we have to understand that's on the other side. Pisces, in pop astrology is absolutely, Pisces is ruled by Neptune, right? Pisces and Neptune in pop astrology are known as being like just very loving and giving, right? Loving and giving energy. And that's true. But that's such a one-dimensional way of looking at it. That's half the story. The other half is nobody can really mess with themselves better than wherever Neptune is and wherever Pisces is. We all have to just kind of know that about ourselves and call ourselves out on it and just say, okay, well, the onus is on me then, right? As part of the human condition, thank goodness, is choice. We are not puppets to any of this stuff. So this is where I always say, you guys who've been watching me know what's my tagline: to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And that's the whole purpose behind my videos, and I'm sure many of the other videos that are on YouTube right now or any of the other platforms. Well, getting back to Neptune, yeah, I mean, absolutely, he does tend to blur fantasy and reality, but it does teach us compassion. He does teach us unity. Now, Neptune, the planet of dreams, illusion, spirituality, it really does embody the realm of unconscious and the transcendent, right? So it's very connected to the subconscious mind. Neptune is also very connected to how we end things in this life and how it is that we've processed them. Now, its influence is often subtle yet profound. So he's not as loud, like, let's say, as like Uranus and Pluto, right? He's a little softer. But it's profound in that it affects our perceptions and our beliefs and our emotional states. Neptune's transits through the houses and the signs can absolutely heighten our sensitivity, blurring boundaries between reality and imagination. And it could bring periods of intense inspiration, artistic creativity, spiritual awakening. But like I said, it could also bring confusion, disillusionment, escapist tendencies. And the psychological impact of this planet often manifests as this increased sensitivity to others' emotions. Because remember, it's the bottomless ocean, heightened intuition, or a strong inclination toward empathy and compassion. Like we could seriously have so much extra compassion, especially, depending on where it's transiting, where it's traveling, where we could really have a bleeding heart for the underdog in particular parts of our life, more so than we have been. However, like there's always a dark side to everything. A poorly aspected Neptune can cause escapism. Now, I don't know you or your chart, so I don't know what the house that Neptune is transiting in your chart, if it's within 10 degrees of a placement in your birth chart, this could either create a benefit for you or a challenge. So it does depend. Because a poorly aspected, again, can cause, like I said, escapism, any kind of addiction or susceptibility to influence and or manipulation, right? A prominent Neptune placement can show a very compassionate and empathetic energy with really strong artistic sensibility. It's a great energy depending on, like if it's conjuncting within 10 degrees, like Venus or Jupiter. Like these could be really, really great for those of you who are artists or you're just looking to grow your life in some way. Um, what else did I want to just say? It was just very much about spiritual experiences, heightened psychic abilities. But again, the other side, self-deception and confusion. You have to really be careful of self-deception because we could really put the rose-colored glasses on when Neptune is in a house, right? So, just kind of keep that in mind, right? As we're discussing this, right? Um, yeah, so I mean that's the long and the short of Neptune. Can be super loving, very compassionate, very creative, but we could wear the rose-colored glasses on. We could try to escape. We could be easily manipulated as well. So that is the basic intro, and let's get into it. We're going to start with our Aries friends. But before we get into our Aries friends, let's talk about Aries for all of us because every single one of us, we all have Aries someplace. We all have all the signs, right? And that's something that a lot of people, if you're rather new to astrology, is really tough to wrap your brain around, right? We have all of the zodiac signs in us. It's just a matter of where. So I'm going to unpack the sign of Aries a little deeper than I typically would. And you want to just understand that this is going to be impactful for the part of your chart that you have Aries in. Let's just start by element is fire for our Aries friends, for our Aries energy. So whatever house you have it in, there's fire. Aries is the warrior on the battlefield. Aries doesn't like to be told what to do. Aries is very, very committed and very connected, is very courageous and brave, if not negatively aspected or in some sort of challenge. But just generally speaking, Aries is the warrior. Aries is the survivor. He's the landlord of the first house. The colors, the energetic colors that are very, very supportive for Aries are red as well as a warm pink. And as far as the most supportive stones, diamond is a very supportive energy, but so is bloodstone. So if you know that you're having some sort of challenge, to get a bloodstone energy, wash it off in rice, maybe charge it out by the moon overnight, and just sort of have like a bloodstone maybe on your desk or in your environment in one way or another. But let's unpack the sign of Aries. Aries is very powerful, definitely a force to be reckoned with, a true initiator at heart, and we are like that in whatever part of our chart we have Aries in. Again, associated with fire. The mode is cardinal. Cardinal means action, right? There's got to be some sort of action taking. But Aries is very connected to this idea of courage and passion and this kind of unwavering spirit. So definitely bold, fearless in the face of challenge. Why? Because Aries is the baby of the zodiac. You want to think of Aries as the baby being pushed out of the nursery, right? Babies, that's when we're the healthiest, in my opinion, by the way, when we're getting pushed out of the nursery, because we haven't been impacted by life yet. We don't know really to be afraid. We have our instincts, but we don't understand the like the innocence of a child, right? We always say, we don't know fear. We don't know. We learn it. Negative affirmations from the adults in our life, and we understand to not do things, right? But if we're dealing with something like just in the natural essence is courageous because we don't understand any other way. So you really want to understand Aries to be very much that way. This idea of boldness and fear. And it's like wanting to do things, feeling very like emboldened, right? I want to do it. And then if somebody comes along and is like, well, how exactly are you going to make that happen? You're like, I don't know. I'm not worried about that, right? Because Aries is leadership energy. And if you understand what it means to be a leader, leaders delegate. They're not the problem solvers. We leave the problem solvers, we leave that to Virgo, right? Aries they don't want to solve problems. They don't want to come up with the solutions, but they will design the house, but you got to give them the money. They will, come up with the strategies for the business, but they're not going to be the soldiers making it happen. You know what I mean? Like it's a warrior energy, but he has his own agency and he understands bravery and courage and he understands what needs to be done. But he's not going to try, he really doesn't want to have to get stuck in the minutia of having to figure out all of like the intricacies of something, right? But the braveness is there, embracing life as an adventure, willingness for adventures, absolutely. Aries truly is the driving force of life. It's that instinct to survive. So it's very important we understand again where that Aries energy is. At the beginning, right? Remember, Aries is at the very beginning. At the beginning, nothing exists, right? Nothing. Then something exists. It's like giving birth, right? There's nothing there, and then something's there, right? That's Aries. From birth, we're poised to conquer the world. It's a very violent process being birthed, right? It is. It's characterized by restlessness and an explosive force. If we're really honest about what giving birth is, it's the restlessness. I'm ready. I'm coming, right? And then it boom, right? It's literally like an explosive out of the body. And then from that point on, Aries understands that the ultimate victor on any battlefield is the last survivor. Cost be damned, right? Even I got to survive. Now you might say, "Oh my gosh, that sounds really, really selfish." Cost be damned. It doesn't matter like at what cost. But it's not selfish. Not really. Aries is neither manipulative nor insensitive, but that energy will do what it needs to do to have its own agency, to have its own like life, to seek whatever experiences we feel like we need to have in that particular sector of our life, right? And seriously, like good flipping luck to anybody who tries to get in our way wherever our Aries energy is. Right? They better not try to get in our way because nothing, not even ourselves, can actually prevent us if we're feeling very healthy in our Aries energy but to get out and seek freedom and have the things be the way we wish them to be, to have our own agency, to have our own say, right? It's really uncommon, maybe a debilitated Aries. It's really uncommon for us to be like wherever our Aries energy is, for us to sort of like wallow in our feelings and like, oh, I have to unpack my childhood and my shadow and all of this. It's like we don't have the patience for that. Even if we do it in other parts of our life where our Aries energy is, it's sort of like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm just gonna go and and just have at it. I'm just gonna work life, right? It's the ram, right? With those horns. That ram is really ready to act on any power that's really going to ultimately shape our lives, you know? And it's very interesting because wherever our Aries is, we'll invite people to come as long as they don't get in our way. So whatever it is, like I have Aries in the fourth house, I'll invite you to come live with me, you come stay with me, but don't get in the way of me being able to live a life that I want, right? When it comes to my emotional security and my emotional stability, do not try to get in my way. And that has been to my detriment sometimes, but I can't say that I haven't, lived the life that I've really wanted to live. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, just that's how I am. If somebody is like this with relationship in the seventh house, right? That would be our Libra friends, right? It would be very different there. It's like, what you want out of a relationship. It's very difficult to kind of like settle for anything outside of that. Doesn't mean that you can't compromise, but there's got to be a point, right? But there's a very like, and wherever our Aries energy is, we're passionate, we're enthusiastic in a way where it could be like contagious. We can inspire people around us with that, our inner warrior, helping other people to conquer their fears in that particular part of life. But it can lead to hasty decisions, right? Could all be a little headstrong in that area where we can clash with anyone who opposes us. We could find ourselves, um, really just wanting to break free from any sort of stagnation in whatever part of life our Aries energy is, understanding that rebirth and embracing our true selves unapologetically is super important in whatever part of our life that we have it in. But Aries does teach us that sometimes we have to move forward. We have to embrace our inner warrior to truly discover our strength and our power in order to manifest new beginnings. And it might have been it's past few years. Let's just say, let's be honest, since 2020. And I'm not saying this because of COVID. I'm saying this because that's when Chiron went into Aries, that wherever our Aries energy is, we could feel a little debilitated, meaning we could feel a little more trepidatious. We could feel a little less courageous. We could feel a little more timid in that particular part of life because Chiron, the wound of self, in Aries, it's the wound of self. We may have not been feeling as confident and as good about ourselves in that particular area, right, of our life. Now, we do have to understand that while courage and agency, these are all really, really good things, we do have to understand the challenge that Aries energy does deal with. Aries energy, wherever we have it, always ready to fight, always ready to battle the murky circumstances, right? That wherever Aries is, we are very good in a crisis in that particular part of our life. Any kind of perceived resistance or threat to you, um, to your peaceful life is really going to be anyone or a person, a situation that you view as an adversary, you can absolutely go after. But this is the thing. Sometimes it's a perception that's driven by an emotion that's not based in reality. And this is something that we have to understand, right? Because too often that could ultimately end up causing some pointless confrontation. And there are there's a fortunate abundance of worthy opponents wherever our Aries energy is, where we end up having to face these very daunting kind of obstacles, right? In whatever part of life, powerful people can try to take your freedom. It could just be circumstance and coincidence, but whatever it is, you could just feel that they're trying to take away your agency because it's grounded in something deeper, like an inner vulnerability that you're carrying with you, maybe from your childhood or from some circumstances that didn't work out very well for you in your life. But whatever it is, there's an intensity to our energy wherever Aries is. There's an intensity to our personality, and this can create obstacles in relationships. Obstacles must be overcome no matter what, right? And as an Aries, you should be really Aries energy in that particular part of your life. You should be able to get past it, right? But the whole point is you just want to understand that stress can find you wherever Aries is. There's got to be a balancing out there. Um, and we have to just be careful because we're with that warrior energy, wherever Aries is, that survivor energy can be consumed by the heat of a battle, right? We need to fulfill our objective in that part of our life, wherever Aries is. So if we ignore the evolutionary crisis, the problem persists. If we ignore, and what I mean by that is if we ignore the fact that we have to change, that we have to step up, that maybe we have to learn to compromise a little better, not be so confrontational, right? Well, we're going to end up stunting ourselves, okay? The real issue is always bypassed, right? Where it's usually really focused down into some sort of vulnerability, some sort of deeper issue. So wherever Aries is, like if you find yourself having arguments with people at work, maybe you have it in the sixth house, like there might be a deeper vulnerability going on about you having to do with your day-to-day work experience, or there might be a vulnerability having to do with a health situation that's going on. The real issue, you want to understand that real issue can easily be bypassed. So, and what happens when we bypass a real issue is it's misdirected to some sort of unrelated target, right? So we can end up really projecting out onto somebody who may not actually deserve it. And then arguments arise where that emotional pitch can absolutely be out of proportion to the apparent content of the conflict. And like in my case in the fourth house, it's like, why can't you just put the damn dish in the sink? Right? Because I have it in the fourth house of home. It's like, is it that much trouble to put a dish in the sink? Now I have to stop myself because I also have my Black Moon Lilith in that place. I have to stop myself, you know, and 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 I do all the time, right? I'm like, all right, put it in perspective. Does it really matter? Is it the dish? It's not the dish. It's not the dish. It's how I am in my home, with my home, because of the home that I was raised in. And I know that full throttle. And I don't cry over that. I just say the reason I like things a certain way in my adult home, in my place, is because I didn't I didn't feel like I had a lot of control over everything, over anything, in my very early environment. I know that. But I'm not going to remember that in the moment when I'll, and my kids are so good. Like they know, and I have a very close relationship. I'm not like a Nutella the Hun, I promise, at home. So they like know that, but like my husband, he's got to be like nudged a little more because he's just like chill about everything. And so, it's like really, put the dish in the sink. And really, who cares? I end up laughing to myself about it, but it took me a long time to get there. You guys get the point. And we all have to be that way, or at least try to grow ourselves into being that. And it's a process. We fall back 3 feet, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward. But it's really important to understand this, right? And really want to avoid any sort of self-righteousness and self-pity in that particular part of your life, right? And where you can question, like saying to yourself, why do I invariably end up making others defensive in this particular part of my life? And the short reason and the perfect answer to that is that chances are you've fought a pointless war in that part of your chart. Okay, guys? So that's Aries. So we have to understand that that's the energy in that house where Neptune's going to be. Okay. So let's start with we're going to get into it and we're going to start with our Aries friends. Okay. Aries, you have Neptune in the first house. That first house energy absolutely diffuses the boundaries between a sense of self, um, as your own self, and a separate identity, right? Having to do with like your sense of self and other people. You have to be careful of like the mirroring can be like on steroids here, where you end up ultimately, and you could just, even if you've never been like this could just be kind of like a season in your life that you're going into where you're a lot more sensitive to the energies around you and you end up reflecting who or whatever is in front of you, right? And because you often will be um, understanding your sense of self and your self-concept from what other people want or need you to be, you could easily look to other people for salvation, especially if you've been in a challenging space where it's very easy for you to look to relationships as for a sense of salvation, where you're saying, like, finally, here's a person who really understands and appreciates me and who is just naturally everything that I need in another person, right? It's this idea of looking for that energy that you feel like is missing in another person. But, that honeymoon portion can be over when you figure out, and you will, that Neptune energy in the first house kind of like opens up and adjusts and adapts. Um, so you could find other people being very changeable and you not having a clear sense of self. So this whole idea of boundaries when it comes to how it is that you engage with people, you know, needs to be understood. Okay. Remember, the first house is the path that you're walking on. So you can be like, I'm really not sure what the next like 5 years of my life looks like. And that could be very, very real for you. You could do a lot of dreaming, you could do a lot of fantasizing about what it is that you would ultimately like. But at the end of the day, there is this undertone of not really being sure who you are, therefore not being really sure the actual path that you want to, actually step on. And not having a fully crystallized sense of self, you could very easily appropriate someone else's. So you're very open during the season, which again is kind of out of context for you guys, where you find yourself going along to get along with somebody else's idea of what's good for you. Um, this idea of distinguishing the self as distinct and unique, right, as an individual, really does conflict with Neptune's tendency to dissolve and merge back into a state of like non-differentiated wholeness, right? Just wanting to like be back in the womb, right? Wanting to sort of just be one with life. It could be very confusing because you're in a space where it's like, this is me, right? Aries, I am. This is where I'm at, but then trying to figure out like, but what do you really want? So it's going to be totally normal if you guys are like, maybe I want to live here, maybe I want to live there, maybe I want to change careers, maybe I want to start this career. I don't know if I want to live here anymore. I'm not sure about this relationship, right? Because it's in the wild card house, it's in the first house. So all of these are going to be very, very normal and natural, okay? And it's just kind of understand that this is just the energy. Like just when you build up something or establish a more solid footing, events seemingly conspire to erode or undermine that very foundation that you were working to create, right? And then down comes the structure, right? So for whatever reason, you're being asked to sacrifice or let go this sense of being a separate self. So there is going to be this requirement of merging with other, but at the same time, you want to have some sort of boundaries, right? So, because Aries is a very independent energy, but with Neptune in your first house, you're going to be asked to actually merge with other, to be more of a blending kind of energy, if that makes sense. Um, you know, and again, you can't grow separate, you can't be separate and self-reliant unless another person has loved you enough to make you feel that you're worthy of being somebody, or that you're worthy of being in that situation with them, right? This Neptune and Aries energy is going to bring up, okay, especially for you guys, because it's in the first house, your early connection to your mother, right? Those early messages from mother energy very early in life. All of those things are going to be rattled. They're going to be, even if you haven't been in touch with those ideas for many years, this transit will make it more in touch, right? More tangible to you. Um, because in those early years, we need that close care and good enough energy, right? Well, good enough kind of thing in order to develop the courage and the strength that we need in order to grow into an individual who is autonomous, right? And who has, our own agency. And the thing is, if that doesn't happen, then not only are you afraid of yourself, but you'll keep searching for that perfect fit with another person, which you didn't have as a child, right? And even though it was years ago and all of that, these things can absolutely rise to the surface. And that could be, it could be difficult adjusting yourself, out of proportion to be what somebody else might need in this space, and the problem is that if you are not enough, then nobody else is enough either. And that's always the other side of that particular sword as well, where there can be a lot of this is a critical nature. That's probably not the right word, but it really is this not feeling good about self, and therefore and not feeling like you're enough, but then nobody else is going to be really enough, right? But if you were someone who had a really healthy connection to your mom, um, this will not be an issue for you. You can actually feel extra close to your children. You could feel extra close to people. It's just a nurturing energy, right? Because not everybody has kids. But you are going to want to explore your environment. You're going to want to experiment with new things. At this stage, there really is this idea of being toyed with this willingness to let go, right? There's got to be a willingness to let go. Now, in the first house, there's got to be a willingness to let go of even your mothering, right? So there's got to be a willingness to let go of children. There's got to be this idea of, having to do with your own children, having to do with, your early environment, having to do with things that maybe you were very, very attached to. This is not about releasing attachments. It's just about not feeling guilty, not making other people feel guilty, allowing full agency, allowing the separateness, right? Really important there. And looking at this idea of what's forbidden as well, right? This idea of, like if you were forbidden in your early environment to separate, or if you feel like you're doing that to your own children, right? This Neptune in the first is absolutely going to bring this up. Self-exploration is really all you need to do, whether it's through therapy or just a really good solid sessions of meditating, really looking at that and understanding, right, that there are two very important stages of symbiosis and separation. And if there was not a secure enough tie with those earlier energies, then you might be afraid to develop a strong individual identity. But in the same way, you may be very afraid to allow your children to develop a very strong individual identity as well, right? So we have to just understand how this might be playing out, in your energy. Now, also, you might start dressing very Neptunian. Very Neptunian is very dreamy. There's like a diffusiveness about it. There's a mystery. It's very enigmatic. So you could start, dressing in things that, are a little more like that, right? A little more mysterious, a little more spiritual. You can have that vibe about you, about your energy for the next 14 years. What else did I want to say here? Yeah, I mean, truly though, the diffusiveness that comes with Neptune in the first can make you appear, at least to other people, to have an element of mystery about you. But just to make you feel for the next 14 years, and I want you to understand, this is just the transit. This is not going to be real. But you can feel like you're wandering aimlessly through life. And of course, that's not true. But that's what, again, remember, Neptune has no feet. It's just like this bottomless ocean. So you want to be very mindful of that. You want to be mindful of not slipping too easily into the role of martyr and then feeling resentful if other people ultimately take advantage of you. Some are fair game for anyone who offers to save you or rescue you. Some of you are, you want to be careful there. Some of you may turn to hard drugs or alcohol in an attempt to alleviate the harsher realities of life. And then you find yourself far worse off at the end of the day. But there are a lot of positives here, right? Having this Neptune energy here is because you can encompass the realms of beyond the ordinary ego borders of existence. You can give expression to collective feelings and images through any sort of artistic medium. So, I mean, this is amazing for those of you who are artists, musicians, anything like that. Your vision can be truly inspiring to other people who are unable to see things so easily, right, in this world, right? You just see things. You're going to be seeing things. And this is excellent for those of you who are counselors, healers. If you're getting into spiritual work, this is an excellent energy to use Neptune in Aries in the first. It's very, very nice energy. Now, if while Neptune is very close to your ascendant, okay, so that's within 10 degrees on each side. So, for example, if you're if your uh, if your ascendant, right, is at 7 degrees, or let's say if your ascendant is at 12 degrees, uh, uh, especially when Neptune is at 2 degrees all the way to 22 degrees, that's going to be within a 10-degree conversation. Um, so you can go through this situation where you're going to have to really say yes to life, right? To counter effect a persistent longing for the past, or a persistent longing to I mean, I was just, let me be frank for a second here. I mean, people could just kind of, some of you could just have a hard time finding the purpose of life, you know? um where you're like, I didn't ask to be invited here. I didn't even want to be born in the first place. And I know that sounds very hyperbolic, but it can manifest like that for some of you, or others of you can be very melancholy for the past. Now, alternatively, these desires can be projected forward in a very spiritual direction, which could give a real solid rise to mystical longings for higher states of consciousness, higher connection to your religion, spirituality, whatever it is, organized or otherwise, anything like that. But the only last thing, the last thing that I want to say is just keeping in mind that this Neptune in the first is going to be quincunxing your sixth house, which is the house of health. And so when we have Neptune quincunxing the sixth, we can have some tricky medical things come up. Now, because Aries is very connected to the external body, it could be things that are on the exterior of our body, like skin situations, anything having to do with also like a limb challenges, anything like that. But Aries also rules from the clavicle up. So anything having to do with like the thyroid, right? The ENT, right? Our brain or mind, right? It all houses all of that. It's particularly our head, right? Aries actually rules the right eye as well, and the left eye is ruled by Taurus. But so just keep in mind that while Neptune's there, you can struggle with, could be rashes, could be allergies, could be some sort of like skin cancers. It could just be anxiety and depression, some sort of like sudden like ENT kind of issue, thyroid, having to do with hypo or hyperthyroid, anything like that. Okay. But that's like the main thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Pisces, I'm doing you guys after Aries because Neptune is in your second house. Okay. Now, what does it mean when Neptune is in the second house? Let's just kind of unpack it. First of all, second house, this is Taurus is a landlord there. It rules our inner organs, our inner body. It's very connected to the health of our inner body. Okay. So when we have Neptune who rules disease and disease in there, we have to understand that Neptune can bring something to the surface, right? Ultimately bring something up to the surface. Now, what's good is that you're in a trine to the sixth house, which it's 4 houses away. Sixth house is the house of health. So it's very supportive, but something can absolutely manifest and come up. Now, the second house rules our mouth and anything that we put in our mouth. So Neptune in the second can absolutely manifest as some sort of like addiction, right? Alcohol, pills, food. Right? Equally so, it could be food. So we just want to be mindful of that energy. But Neptune is very dreamy, very creative. Second house is the money we make from the work that we do. So you can have really good creative energies that end up allowing you to make money, to be able to exercise some sort of talent in a way where you're making more money. But we also have to just address the fact that there may be an unrealistic approach to your assessment of self-worth. And I'm not saying that to say, don't think big of yourself, but I do want you to just understand that Neptune can bring that. Neptune can also bring a lack of clarity for you surrounding money, because the second house has to do with the money you make from the work that you do, as well as your possessions. So there could be a lack of clarity around that. And there's got to be some sort of like linking between monetary values and spiritual values, right? There's got to be like a link between the two. Um, I've seen a bunch of different manifestations of this particular transit. Neptune meaning in the second, at the very least. Sometimes it's just general confusion and nebulousness in the handling of finances and investment. You might just be like a really confused about money. Unseen forces can undermine speculation. What seems like a safe bet can turn out to be fraudulent, or you could get a substantial paycheck that is then followed by a huge bill, or you can even have somebody in your life, right? Because that Neptune, your ruler, is very connected to the victim as well. So somebody could be taking advantage of you when it comes to money as well, you know. But ultimately, a good way to go is rather than seeking security and well-being from outside of yourself, you might need to reconsider your value system and really look inward to see what some call like the higher spiritual planes for fulfillment, and really connecting to your belief system, your religion, organized or otherwise. Really understanding what the saying is to like truly like give it over to God, right? Understand what you can control and control that, and then kind of letting go of what you can't control is really important. Um, you might even unconsciously provoke this situation by setting up losing what you have gained or valued, as if you sense that giving everything away or up or being sabotaged or needing to sacrifice something is your path to actually being like rebirthed or redeemed, or being allowed to manifest a genuinely new path. You may feel like set up a situation where you feel like you have to give everything up in order to have that new path, right? Um, and some of you may be in that space. Look, I mean, I don't know if you're needing to move or change jobs because of a toxic thing, or get out of a relationship because of a toxic environment, whatever the case is. But it's kind of looking at your possessions and your money and just being like, I have to go for what is right and what's good for me. If somebody is taking liberties with you, if somebody is taking advantage of you. But at the same time, when Neptune's in there, you may not really appreciate yourself, right? You may not appreciate your innate gifts. You may not appreciate how very beautifully sensitive you are, how very empathic you are, your artistic and your creative imagination, and the ability you naturally have to just really not take care of other people, but soothe them, help them to feel better, right? And having Neptune in the second, any sort of like Neptunian profession is really nicely indicated. So that would be anything having to do with spirituality, anything having to do with acting, modeling, painting, poetry, dance, fashion, photography, um, you know, selling alcohol and or narcotics can also be there. That I just have to say that is, what that is. But professions as varied as that of a chemist, a clergyman, or even like a merchant marine can be connected to like a Neptune in the second house as well. But ultimately, there's a tendency here to imbue the material world, right, the 3D world, with symbolic and emotional significance. An object or a possession may be valued not so much for what it is, but what feelings it inspires in you. And you know that you're going on the right path if that, and that's a natural space for you guys anyway, because you guys are very sensitive. But it's like this idea of just perceiving the essence of the underlying form itself. So really like excellent energy to work with, like crystals, anything that is um representative of something else. I do have to say it's a very nice energy to learn tarot if you're inclined to that. Very nice for that. Great for studying astrology as well, but it just might be a little trickier for you to absorb the concepts, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Um, I mentioned the potential illness, addiction, being taken advantage of regarding money. And just this idea of not, because second house is also your self-esteem and your sense of self. And with Neptune in there, there could be a really hard time figuring out, like, who you are, right? who exactly you are and where exactly it is that you belong, right? And just understand that that's okay. And you really want to work to establish your own boundaries. What is good here and what's been good is that Saturn, not right away, but Saturn is traveling with Neptune. Pretty much. Right now, they're in an out of bounds conjunction. But once the summer hits, Saturn is going to be in that Aries energy at least for 3 months. Then he's going to dip out for a few months and then he'll be in. And then they're going to travel at least for the next few years together. And Saturn is good in helping us to create those boundaries, but expect between now and the summer for it to be like a confusing time, right? Just because of that energy. But anyway, guys, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Aquarius, you guys have Neptune in the third house. So you have an ability to communicate, right, during this transit through the arts or spiritual pursuits, because Neptune is very spiritual, very artsy. And the third house is all about communication and thinking, right? Also learning, right? You could be learning things that are very spiritual. You could be learning art. You could be learning new ways of communicating. You could be doing a lot of on-the-job training, by the way, is very indicated here. Now, on one level, Neptune in this placement can confuse and scatter the mind. And I could tell you, as a Capricorn rising, who I've had Neptune in my third house for 14 years, and I have to tell you, definitely was killing me with writer's block. I mean, before that transit, I had Neptune in the second house. I was writing poetry. I was, I mean, I have my master's in poetry. I very creative. Always that I was like I just felt like in this stuckness. I was able to do it, but it wasn't as like natural, right? Because Neptune is confusing, but I was able to be creative in other ways. So maybe not my old ways, but I ended up learning that I was very good at other things that I didn't even realize. So this could certainly be how it manifests for you. Um, One thing I have to say, this placement does exhibit uncanny insight into the undercurrents and the subtleties in the environment, just like the energies around you. That said, there are some dangers to keep in mind. The desire here to see what is beautiful and divine in your surroundings, that can end up producing a kind of like selective perception in which only the good is seen, and that which doesn't fit into that category for you isn't noticed. So it's super easy to not see somebody's dark spot. And we say, okay, no one's perfect. Everybody has flaws, but if you're in a situation, because the third house opposes the ninth house, which has to do with like negotiating and dealing with people, you just want to make sure that you're not putting the rose-colored glasses on anyone when it comes to communication and when it comes to how it is that you think about that person, right? You just want to try to be very realistic. You can be so open to the mind and opinionated opinions of other people that you may think that you're thinking your own thoughts, but in reality, you're actually picking up and vibing what it is that they're thinking. Um, so you want to be a little careful of that. In some cases, you might even serve as like a kind of spokesperson for other people. Sometimes you might even believe that that knowledge is what will redeem you, right? But what can be a little tricky here is remember, it's in there with Neptune, and Neptune has no feet. So here, because of that, you're going to study, 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 but you're never going to feel like you know enough or that you are prepared enough, right? Or you will wait for someone to come along to inspire you in a way that truly, truly speaks to you, but they might not ever come along. Or maybe they do come along and you just find that you're completely absorbing that person's ideology and that person's messaging rather than trying to really, in any way, a solid way form your own, right? So you do want to just be mindful of that you're very kind of like this open sponge to the communication energies around you. This can be very good when it comes to being very, like a soothing energy for people to speak to. You could be very good at mediating circumstances and all of that. That's great. But it could be difficult for you to solidify how it is that you feel you need to be thinking. Um, it's very easy to feel a little scapegoated in this energy as well. So that could be a challenge, right? When it comes to just being misunderstood. Now, the third house also does represent our siblings and extended family, our neighbors, our neighborhood. It has to do with our equipment, like our car, our computer. And our ability to learn things, right? So, well, I kind of addressed already this idea of feeling like you need to learn and learning and learning, but it feels like almost like a bottomless pit there. But Neptune does rule disease and disease, okay? I'm not saying this to be scary, but a lot of you have been watching me do know that um, I lost two siblings within 5 days of each other back in June. My sister died on June 7th, and my brother died. One of my brothers died, both in their sleep. They weren't sick. He died on the 12th, right? And so Neptune was conjunct Chiron. I mean, because Neptune does rule disease and disease. It's very connected to illness. And the third house is siblings. I'm not saying that your siblings are going to pass, but there can be also just some challenges with them. So you want to watch out. If you have a sibling who has a tendency to addiction, if you have a sibling who has a tendency to be connected to relationships where there's any sort of abuse involved, and there's anything going on with their health, you want to make sure that you're being really there for them and that you're just being mindful of that, right? If it's at all possible. 'Cause those are the different ways, right, that things could absolutely manifest there. But very creative, very, very super, super creative energy, and actually really beautiful when it comes to being a person who will be able to soothe situations, which is a great skill set to have in the work environment, which is really, really good. But you do want to just be mindful though, Aquarius, because Pluto is in your first house, chances are a lot of you who are in the stage of your life where you're working and you're still kind of like popping around to different careers or whatever, you're going to be learning and learning. Don't get frustrated if you feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn, or oh my gosh, don't get sucked down that rabbit hole, right? You want to create boundaries for yourself, really use it. It's okay if you feel super, super confused, especially like between now and June. Then Saturn is going to be going into that third house to join you, and Saturn is going to help bring some sort of like organization and some sort of structure for you. But between now and then, if you're really confused and you feel a little overwhelmed, just kind of wait for that transit to chill a little bit. It will chill. It needs that. Once Saturn is going to be good for that energy in there. But yeah, so I mean that's the gist of that transit, a little deeper than what I gave in March. I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Capricorn. Okay, Neptune is in the fourth house for us. Now, we have to understand here that Neptune is very dreamy. It's very connected also to things that we haven't completely fully unpacked in our past, right? And so this dreamy Neptune energy in the fourth is really going to can manifest as looking at any sort of idyllic memories that we might be holding on to, having to do with home and family from our past, or our own idea of what is the ideal home, property, real estate. What is the ideal family situation? What is the idea? You know what I'm saying? Like getting stuck to some sort of ideal, which may or may not be true or even part of your reality. Now, for a lot of us, there might be a sense of loss surrounding home and family, right? Where we may seek to escape into a dreamlike home setting, um, because this is where we will ultimately feel like safe and comforted. But from deep down inside, we should exercise caution in selecting the environments in which we live during this 14-year transit. Discrimination and free choice are not always on the same menu, as Neptune. They're not, of course that is the situation. So being very sensitive to the environment is something that we need to understand. So just on the point of having to do with like home property real estate, let's remember that Neptune rules the underworld, right? The under the ocean, it's bottomless ocean. So he's very connected to water. Hmm. So Neptune in the fourth, we have to be careful of our plumbing system. Like I know that we're having this, so I have already made arrangements to address the plumbing in my house. The guy told me that I could wait another couple of years, and I was like, yeah, I know I can. I know I have 14 years, but I don't want to wait until it becomes a big issue for me because I know it's old, and I'm scared of that transit to be honest with you, because yeah. So anyway, I'm having that done this summer. Um, but just be very mindful of that, right? Having to do with anything having to do with your sprinklers, the water system in your house as well. The actual water, anything having to do with the plumbing. But this is a pretty tricky transit to actually pin down, having it in the fourth house. Um, some with it, no matter what the aspect to Neptune is, report like just so much joy, playing with children, close family, special dinners, um, telling stories, movie night, game night, all of these beautiful things, because that's very Neptunian, right? Being able to create environments like that, which would be great, That's a very positive manifestation of it, which is obviously very supportive from a very loving space, which is beautiful to actually move forward right into in this next part of your life. For others of you, you may not be experiencing that right now, but this transit can make you seriously yearn for days gone by, you know, those earlier experiences where maybe you did have that, yearning to be back, in that childhood space. You might even be in a space of comparing the problems and drudgery, right, for lack of a better term, of adult life with the good old days. And, and realizing that you just don't have that right in your experience right now and trying to unpack that. But you always want to say, okay, but Neptune wants, serenity. Neptune wants creativity and beauty and compassion. And in the fourth house of our emotional stability, we really need to tap into that and to bring us ourselves those peaceful experiences and not wait for other people to show up to bring those to us at the same time. Some of you may have blended so thoroughly with family that you never developed a more individualistic sense of who you really are, genuinely who you are. Or some of you may be experiencing that right now where you're so blended with your family and everybody wants so much from you all the time that you're not sure who you are as an individual. So, in that case, right, the way that you think and feel and your tastes and your opinions and your any of the proclivities, right, reflect from other people who you're living your life with in your home, or you may be realizing that, your tendencies are really based from your childhood. And these are going to be things that you may be called to task to actually visit, and unpack. You may have come from what, a lot of family therapists called enmeshed families, right? Who live very tightly within closed systems where there are unwritten rules that no one should behave differently and understand that what's expected. Otherwise, it's going to create some sort of disharmony. Now, a lot of you may have gone on to maybe you had that experience in your childhood and in your adult years. Now you've become your own individual, right? But then there's acknowledgement that if you've made the decision to kind of forge your own path and go in a different way, that you have somehow created an environment of disharmony, or that you're somehow different than what it is that you're supposed to be. And you could be just kind of going into a period like that where you're realizing that. You know, that how you're different, where you're different. And Neptune's price for remaining safe within that structure of such a family is that of your own personal identity as well as your freedom. But there's got to be this sort of peeling away of like self and other, right? Self and first family, who you grew up with, or self and the family that you have right now. And it's not, but it's got to be about this like healthy separation, right? Between the two. Um, and in fact, a lot of you during the Neptune in the fourth house transit can be doing a lot of discussing of like the joys of your early life, or the joys of when your kids were little, the joys of what used to be going on within your home, right? The good old days, kind of, and then, ultimately you lower your voice and you're like, but then it all changed when whatever happened, the divorce, the death, the moving out, the whatever it happens, right? So tapping into those joyful moments, but then recognizing where things changed, right? And that's just Neptune being, doing his old tricks, asking for sacrifice and adjustment. And even if it's having to do with memories and things that have happened in the past, and making sense of all of this is not easy, but there are a couple of concrete things to be said about Neptune in the fourth. Um, you know, I mean, typical, there are sacrifices, right? Because Neptune is very connected to sacrifices on the home front. So this could mean maybe your children are moving out, or there could be the loss of some sort of dynamic, maybe the loss of a pet. Um, there could be a separation. There could be people moving in, where what you're sacrificing is having your own space, and maybe you're needing to adapt more of a caretaker energy, right? So many different ways that it could manifest, but it's just this idea of making sacrifices on the home front. Um, this could absolutely be manifesting for a lot of you. Um, a lot of times it does indicate like family breaking up or dissolved in some way, but it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It could just simply be because of circumstance. Like maybe somebody gets married and they move out, or they're leaving for work, or they're going away to school, or something like that. Neptune here can also indicate the giving up of tradition as well as family patterns, to seek a spiritual home and family, not necessarily like blood ties, you know, um, really appreciating the sea as well. So a home by the sea, a vacation by the sea, just going and sitting by the sea, finding a lot of emotional solace, sitting by the sea. Anything like that is very nicely indicated here. But there can also be this realization. Again, this is a very long transit. It's 14 years, but expect within the first couple of years, while you will be unpacking the connection to your early environment, that maybe you over idealized your father in some way at a particular point in life, and realize when it is that you cross that threshold where you started to examine him and understand him a lot more realistically. Maybe your father was absent, or he was missing, or he was super strict, or whatever it is. You will be reminded, even if you've done a lot of work on this, to his human side, but then taking it a step further and understanding how that's impacted the choices that you've made on your path moving forward, right? Because it is the fourth house, depending on the age and stage that you're at, in general, this placement can be a call to sacrifice parents as well in some way or another. So you may be giving them up voluntarily, because maybe there are toxic energies in your life, and you still love them, maybe you even speak to them, but you do it from like a little bit of a distance, or there can be some challenges having to do with the health, right, of parents. There can also be the realization of skeletons in the closet, right? That really are begging to come out, whatever it is. And they're in your closet, having to do with your family, your situation. So whether that's like the alcoholic, the drug addict, the mentally disturbed family member, close relative, or maybe it's even you, right? I mean, just a lack of certainty about the family as well. Understanding that some of you just may be straight up realizing that the family that you were raised in brought you more confusion than clarity in your life. And that you're realizing again, it's because this is not working alone. It's working in sextile to Pluto. There's a lot of other things going on in the energy. We're all changing right now and realizing what needs to be let go of and just accepted. And like, you know what? My early environment was so confusing, but my life right now does not have to be. I don't have to live in confusion. I don't need to feel like I'm sacrificing anything. That's got a negative connotation to it. How about I lean more into understanding of the cycles of life and just, trying to make the best out of the current circumstances, right? That really is a better place, a better way rather of dealing with it. Um, there will be very deep spiritual longings, which are going to be popping for a lot of you guys. You might have a very strong pull back to your religion, to higher spirituality, whatever it is, and that's just going to grow, by the way, over the next 14 years. This next 14 years for a lot of you, a lot of us, right? Because I'm in that with you, could be marked by very peaceful seclusion where you just very peacefully and willingly disengaged from life. There is a danger there. You could regress back to the position of a helpless child, especially if you felt that your needs were never really looked after earlier in your life. You want to be careful of that, Capricorn. You have to be careful of not making your life too small as we go into this next 14 years. We want to be careful there. Yeah, I mean, just awareness, something, doing things, anything to really rail against the unconscious patterns of childhood. Doing whatever you need to do to bring those to the surface of awareness so that you could do something to change them, even if it's just shining a light on it. And even if you've done a lot of work, right? We're onions with legs, right? If you think about it, we do work, we do work, we do work. And then it's like, wow, there's yet another layer of myself that I didn't realize is there. So doing all of that unpacking is going to be very good for you. So that's the long and the short of it there. But I do want you to understand that Neptune in the fourth is so beautiful for decorating your home, for creating a little meditation space in your home. I strongly recommend that. Doesn't matter how small it is, even if it's just like a little corner in your home, and whatever makes you feel good. It could be crystals, it could be a religious statue, it could be a picture of a family member who you really love. As long as it's something that you feel brings you solace and peace, and you're able to exercise empathy for yourself, right? More than anybody else, for yourself. But don't shy away from hosting movie night, hosting game night, making the big family dinners, doing all of that when people can have them. But don't get too disappointed when people can't come because of other things going on in life, right? But be that open, expressive energy. Okay, my friends? Thanks for hanging with me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Sagittarius, so Neptune is transiting your fifth house, and in the fifth house, Neptune wins some and loses some. Loses, sorry. I mean, this is the fifth house is all about your children, creative projects, monetizable talents, falling in love, love affairs, romance, taking a chance. We got to be a little careful there with the Neptune in there. Gambling, please be careful. I don't recommend it. But let's unpack what it is, right? On the one hand, right, this placement brings very rich and very vivid imagination, lots of creativity, very creative flair, and the natural ability um, to just really wear your shoulders out on your sleeve in a very grand and exuberant way. On the other hand, circumstances that you attract into your life may require that you give and become what others want and need rather than what you would like to do or have for yourself. But should these coincide, meaning that what you want to give other people is the same thing as what you're being asked of, then literally there's nothing better. I mean, this is just going to be such a joyful and fulfilling type of energy, really better than anything else in your chart. Beautiful, beautiful. But it does matter, right? This idea, though, of are people on the same page as you? If they're not on the same page, though, you are going to be asked to sacrifice a bit on your end for someone else. Now, a fifth house energy, maybe you're in business with somebody, or you need to sacrifice something for a business, or to get that project made, that creative project, or something having to do with your kids. And it's always this idea, though, of putting the energy out there, right? Because the problem, like, when Neptune first goes in, right, it's this idea of like, am I even free to do what I really want to do? And in that fifth house energy, are you even free to manifest that creative endeavor? Are you even free to open up your own business? Do you have any control over that situation with your kids? And the thing is, you might not. And that's the thing. And that's got to be noted, because sometimes here with this Neptune energy, the more that you search for pleasure, the more it eludes you. So the more you look to accomplish something within your business, having to have it a particular way, it may elude you. The more that you chase that creative endeavor, the more it'll elude you. The more you chase your children to do something or be a certain way, can elude you. And this is definitely the kind of energy as well, where if you've been trying to get pregnant and you can't, you're not able to conceive, relax and forget about it. I know, so much easier said than done, but it's the kind of thing where as soon as you kind of just like relax and you don't worry about it anymore, and you just kind of like give it over to God, that's when, the pregnancy happens. But and I know that sounds like a little bit of a bummer, but it's a bummer. It's not always so bleak, but you are often called upon here to make sacrifices in the area of creativity or children or within relationship, right? Some of you may even have to give up a career for the sake of a more stable or routine existence, right? Maybe because of your children, or because of an illness, or because of other things going on. Or you will give up a more stable and routine existence for a sake, of a career in the arts, or a career having your own business, right? Because that's like a baby in and of itself, right? All of the hours that dedicates, but you have to dedicate to that. But whether or not a profession in this field is sought, you will benefit from any spare time creative outlet, which ultimately offers you a chance to express your feelings, your emotions, and an amazing inspiration as well. You are very inspiring in this energy. Now, romantically, you are usually bursting at the seams here during this transit, right? Looking to embark on like the romance of all time, right? Really getting very more serious about some kind of relationship, but being very particular though about the relationship. Like, the romance, the connection is going to be even more important to you with the Neptune in the fifth. But it can bring complications in love in the fifth house. One version is you could fall in love with somebody who's unattainable in some way. In this case, the loved one can be whoever it is that you're into. You could safely idealize them and worship them at a distance, or sacrifice them. You're somehow sacrificing them, where maybe they're in another relationship, or they're unattainable, or whatever it is. You have to sacrifice your ability to be with that person. Very often this placement can identify with love with a cause, right? Where, this person needs me to save or fulfill him, or the reverse. This person will salvage and redeem me, right? Whatever it is. More positively, though, you have a natural gift for uplifting and healing others. There's no doubt about it. And with Neptune in the fifth, for a lot of you who are, if you just play around with like tarot and astrology and all of those things, anything in the spiritual realm, this is a nice energy to actually get into a business like that, right? So the fifth house is opening your own business, and Neptune is very spiritual. Now, sacrifices may have to be made as well, like I mentioned a few moments ago regarding children, where some of you can feel martyred by parenthood, right? Where you're like, if it wasn't for my kids, I could have done this, could have done that, even if they're old and out of the house, older and out of the house. Reflecting on your joy, reflecting on your life, it's like, well, I could have done that, but I couldn't because of my kids or whatever it is. On the other hand, you may idealize a child or turn the child into your source of salvation. So this is always something that we do need to be mindful of as well, right? Where you say, if the child loves me against all odds, if the child is wonderful or successful, then my life is redeemed. And that could be a lot of pressure on them and not really fair to anyone involved. So we just have to be careful there. But obviously, there must be a willingness on the part of any parent, those of you who are parents, with this placement to free a child to live his or her own life. There's got to be this willingness. And I'm going to tell you, this absolutely does not matter how old your kids are, but this idea of feeling like too enmeshed, you have to be careful because Neptune can create a very enmeshed energy. We have to be a little careful. Now, you might even find that especially your oldest child, because the fifth house does represents children, generally speaking, but especially, in our own charts, we would look at our fifth house to represent our oldest child, right? And that oldest child can reflect some sort of Neptunian or some Piscean qualities in the sense of possessing maybe unusual creative or artistic abilities, or more challenging manifestations could absolutely be like mental, physical, or emotional disabilities, or they could be challenges having to do with like addictions or self-sabotaging behaviors in some way. But what's important is the spiritual growth gained through experience with children for you guys, right? Because in whatever area Neptune is placed, there can be a kind of suffering which has a softening effect on us. We get softened. We absolutely do. We change, but in a nice way, in a softened way. Invariably, the parent who loses or is compelled to give up a child will be profoundly affected and altered through whatever it is that Neptune must teach in this fifth house. Some with displacement work well with disabled or troubled children or adolescents. Anything like that. I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, to my child? These are general messages, guys, but you want to understand that the idea of needing to sacrifice something could just simply be stepping back and allowing your children to make some mistakes, allowing your kids to live their own life. Let them go through it a little bit to help strengthen them, right? But balancing it out, right? Because remember, it's the twin fish. We don't want to be like, you're on your own, right? You don't want to be like that, but you just don't want to go in and just be a fixer in every way, shape, or form. You don't want to be a fixer in the relationship. Right? Because Neptune is very rose-colored glasses, right? And in the house of falling in love, love affairs, and romance, we absolutely have the rose-colored glasses on when it comes to relationships, when it comes to our children, when it comes to a project that we're looking at getting into, the idea of a business. So we just want to make sure, and that this confusion can absolutely be heightened between now and June. Once June hits, Saturn's going to be going into that fifth house with Neptune, and Saturn helps us to create boundaries, he does help us to feel like we have something to stand on, right? So I think that's all I wanted to say for you. Just be careful about gambling and speculation, because with Neptune here, there are no guarantees, right? And that fifth house is where we gamble. So be super careful there, my friends, okay? All right, my friends, that is what I have for you, Sag. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Scorpio, so you guys have Neptune in the sixth house. So let's talk about this, because there are some basic conflicts between the principles of Neptune and the sixth house. Neptune really yearns for wholeness, things that are unbound, things that are infinite, right? Does not like boundaries. The sixth house, which is the natural domain of Virgo, divides everything into component parts, right? It examines one thing at a time, it's very organized, and clarifies what something is by contrasting it with something else, right? Now, while Neptune keeps falling apart in order to be put back together again in a new and better way, that sixth house likes everything labeled and neatly in like proper cubbies, right? So they're very different types of energies here. And obviously, we can't always have it both ways, and one or the other principle is going to have to bend. So sometimes that sixth house needs for order and efficient functioning, right? We need that. And then, which can suppress the Neptunian urge to relax and let go and just float freely. But the same way, Neptune can really kind of loosen up that Virgo energy. But they're not comfortable together, is basically the point. So ultimately, the challenge here is to understand how to function within defined limits and boundaries and not lose sight of your connection to everything and everyone around you. So there's got to be a balancing out of those energy. Now, this placement does indicate that you're going through a season where you're going to have a very sensitive and delicate nervous system, right? It's what's, some of us call like a leaky aura, if you know what that is. And as a result, having this transit in this place, you are prone to invasion from outside forces. So you're certainly more susceptible to germs and to illnesses in the atmosphere. So I really recommend that you get very into some sort of organized exercise regime or some sort of technique which ultimately strengthens the nervous system. You should also be cautious to discover which foods do and do not agree with your nervous system. Well, with your system in general, not only your nervous system. So now because this is sextiling Pluto in Aquarius in the fourth house. The fourth house and the sixth house are very connected to our general health. That Pluto energy in the fourth house, I really would recommend, looking into anything that is like anti-inflammatory, you know. Um, yeah, especially because Uranus is getting ready to go into Gemini. I would definitely recommend that anything that is start there. I would start there and just to be very mindful of anything that your body is responding to that it doesn't really like. You need to find that balance between indiscriminate urges where there are no boundaries and over caution in diet and life where there's too many boundaries. You have to kind of have a middle of the road, but you have to start by being able to identify what is actually um, sensitive for your particular system. Now, I could tell you most certainly during this season, right, for the next 14 years, more than up to this point, you're going to be very, very sensitive to drugs and alcohol. And you may need far like a lower quantity to be affected. So just be very careful with those. Illnesses are often emotional in origin and difficult to diagnose clearly. In some cases, I've seen people, first of all, get diagnosed incorrectly, could be given the wrong prescription, be treated for something that they didn't have. So question everything. Go for second and third opinions. Some of you will benefit by seeking treatment from alternative or complementary medicines like homeopathy, going to a naturopath, acupuncture, massage, you know the deal. Anything like that. Which approach prevention and cure on a more subtle level, than, allopathic medicine in general. So conversely, now with this energy here, you may have healing abilities and sometimes to choose work. A sixth house also was your day-to-day work environment, to choose work which gives expression to those gifts. So this could be, you could be deeply aware of the body as a vessel of spirit. This could be getting into personal training, getting into Reiki, teaching meditation, anything like that. But as with any other sixth house placement, illness can be understood as a message that something in life is just not right. and needs adjusting. So you have to really look at if you're coming up with a lot of aches and pains and you just kind of feel like, oh, now what? You really have to look at your deeply personal life and what's going on and where is the discord within you pertaining to that particular part of your life. Um, something needs adjusting there, and your faith and your attitude will play a large part in the course of any recovery that you might need to be going through. Now, sometimes the psychological or spiritual awakening and understanding which comes a result of illness can profoundly alter your whole slant on existence. You just need going through like one really solid illness, and you're just like, I do not like not feeling my best self. I don't like relying on people, whatever the case is. And sometimes that could be a genuine kick in the tush to get us to motivate us to actually take better care of ourselves. And even though like illness, cannot be attributed to any one planetary placement, um, there can be, Neptune and problems caused by malignant tissue in the body can absolutely happen with this Neptune in the sixth. So, and this could be due to X-rays, the intake of various toxins, or just because of the occasional slip up, or just doing something that's maybe not the healthiest for you. The body produces cells which are then properly not attuned to the needs of the whole organism. So I definitely recommend that if you're not feeling it, like if you're normally a person who's healthy and strong and you can fight imperfections, but your system is weak or overly stressed, um, that those cells can continue to malfunction. So you're very susceptible to cell malfunction right now. So really, again, not to be scary, but don't miss your doctor's appointment. Get all of your baseline stuff. Make sure you're getting the baseline, typical blood work, full panel cholesterol, thyroid, get everything checked. All right, get everything checked. Know where you're starting so that you can go regularly, and then you have that point of reference, right? Very important there. But we want to be careful here, right? Because again, this is very connected to this idea of malignancy. Now, on another hand, sacrifices may have to be made in the area of work, and you will be extra sensitive to the atmosphere at work, right? You could easily be a scapegoat for what goes on or wrong, and be a victim of an employer or a coworker's deceitful energy, a deceitful behavior. On the other hand, fellow workers might turn to you for salvation and support, thinking that you could get everything done. If well aspected, it depends on what else is in your personal sixth house. There is usually a close and uplifting rapport with associates. Some of you may look to a job to bring you just your joy and happiness in life. I've seen a lot of people work very hard while not initially receiving the recognition that they deserve, and then realizing, okay, maybe I should be doing something else. Employment could entail a Neptunian skill. So that could be anything from like a career in medicine, healing chemistry, anything having to do with the artistic imagination across the board. In some cases, because Neptune is the ruler of the bottomless ocean, it could be a job in a bar, a pub, or even anything having to do with the sea. Um, a lot of times there are even if you might be feeling this now, where you're just not very interested in the mundane practicalities of everyday life. Probably been feeling this, especially for the past year, right? Any excuse could be found to avoid the drudgery of like things like whatever, take basic housework or anything that's like really, but dealing with bills. You might find that you're just throwing stuff on the side. Okay, I'll deal with it later. Now, conversely, some of you may be obsessed with daily chores as if, heaven on earth was achieved through good organization in life, right? Whoever said cleanliness is next to godliness must have had like a really solid Neptune transit in the sixth house. But, some of you will perform practical tasks as like a form of service to others. helping people out, maybe in your neighborhood, or just helping people out in your family. Housework could also be used as an escape or a way of avoiding other areas of life that need dusting, for lack of a better term. Discrimination is advised in choosing any sort of help, any help. I mean, whoever does your dry cleaning, your nails, anybody who is of service to you, literally, like your mechanic. Think of all the things that you do in life, wherever it is, Neptune there, it's just you're more of an open vessel to be taken advantage of, and you're open to deception, right? So any sort of disillusionment or pain in the domain of Neptune helps us to recognize our limits and their imperfections, and it does help us to open up to a greater and a lot more comprehensive awareness of ourselves and our lives in general. Having, really looking at this idea of being taken advantage of, just have your spidey senses tuned on for that, whether it's just like in your relationships or just out about your neighborhood. Even having to do with your medical professionals. And listen, the last thing I want to do is make you feel paranoid, but I just want you to be mindful of these things. Now, in the most positive sense, those of you who have this Neptune transit in the sixth can take a divinely inspired vision and bring it into concrete manifestation. So, you could see divinity everywhere. Right? I mean, there's that saying that, in every particle of dust, there are present Buddhas without numbers, right? So it's this idea of there being this potential everywhere, and you're able to see it. Your clairsentient skills are going to be very tuned in. I mean, you guys are already that, but it's going to be kind of on steroids in this space. So, nice energy if you want to get into any of the spiritual arts having to do with your day-to-day work environment is definitely a nice way to go. So that is what I have for you, my Scorpio friends. I hope this was helpful for you. See you guys next time. Okay, Libra, Neptune in the seventh. Okay. This is a very important placement to understand. I'd have to say Neptune in the first, but then also this, right? They work opposite each other. So you can encounter during this Neptune transit some complexities in the area of personal relationships, which can serve to change and transform your consciousness and your understanding of life. And through the joys of intimacy and closeness, or through pain, disillusionment, or loss incurred, really just kind of, I want to say manifesting, because I don't feel like this is like a one and done thing. It's like manifesting in partnership. You can ultimately be reborn into a new level of awareness about yourself within relationship and what it is that you need in relationship, and being very observant, right? Because wherever Neptune is, we end up needing to sacrifice. So you may feel like you need to sacrifice something in that seventh house. So for some of you, it could be a job, because the seventh house is also contracts, our bosses. It's also our energetic output at work. So some of you may be realizing that it's time for you to not do what you do anymore. You might even be deciding to not work anymore. You might be realizing that in order for a relationship to work, you may need to sacrifice something that you deem as something, ideal, within that realm. There are a lot of different manifestations of this transit, but some of you are going to be looking for a god or a goddess to worship and to revere so that they could save you, whether it's through finances or whether it's through a relationship, and to, quell those feelings of loneliness and isolation. You can often yearn to be absorbed really by another person, because this is the kind of energy where even if you're in relationship, you feel very lonely. There's a loneliness about it. Or even if you're working in a place, or you're doing a particular job, there's a loneliness about it, right? And rather than taking responsibility to become a complete person in your own right, a partner may be sought to make you more whole, or a job may be sought to make you more whole. This idea of wanting to lose, feel fixed by an external energy. And in this sense, you love others because you need them for something, right? Now, taken to an extreme, the other person becomes like an article of clothing you wear or a piece of equipment you use. And I know that sounds really harsh, but this is just Neptune is kind of tricky in this space. Now, Neptune is not entirely happy, though, with that situation. This planet's noble idea of love is to love and not ask for anything in return. But if you become too dependent on another person, you do not truly appreciate them. You may find that in one way or another, your partner lets you down or the relationship is disrupted. Consequently, you are faced with having to develop for yourself what you sought in the other person and learn a more selfless kind of love in that whole transaction. So wherever Neptune is, a lot is asked of us. So a lot will be asked of you in that seventh house energy, be it having to do with relationship, a boss, some sort of contract, or your energetic output at work. Now, the other variety of displacement are those who are looking for someone to whom they can play savior, right? Where you're going in and saving something. So here the idea of relating is to rescue and redeem another person, which is that reputation of displacement for an attraction to victim types, the alcoholic, the drug addict, the criminal, the unstable people with a shady or difficult past, or just simply some profound unresolved issue. And the tricky part here is that the amount of parenting this person may need very often will make you feel martyred and underappreciated, even though it's kind of the thing that you're initially calling toward yourself. So unconsciously, you may believe that by giving something up, you'll be cleansed and purified. And on the basis of this hidden agenda, you may fall in love with someone who isn't free or who isn't attainable, like somebody who's already married or someone you simply can't be in a relationship with because of whatever kind of circumstance, other circumstances. So obviously this would involve adjustments on the part of the person, going through this, obviously, or relinquishing the relationship entirely and just saying, I said we're going to work. Some of you may not want to do that. Some of you, I mean, I've also seen it where a lot of people with this particular transit settle into like a platonic relationship where the desires of the flesh are transcended. And it's not uncommon for relationships in marriage to sort of transcend to that place where the physical aspect is kind of eliminated or really not desired very much, or this attempt to be friends with a person who you actually can't be in a connection with, and you try to be friends with them. But regardless, those of you with displacement are often will be genuinely called upon to give a great deal in relationship, to make sacrifices for the partner and be accepting of the limitations which the other person cannot easily resolve. Sometimes you guys may exhibit a kind of unselfish love, which is saintly and worthy of true respect, yes. However, at other times you may allow yourself to be walked over as if you have no rights in the relationship, and how dare you have your own mind and desires, because there is a very fine line between Neptune, authentic selflessness, and tolerant, that doormat energy that I was talking about in the beginning of the video. So not surprisingly, though, having a Neptune transit here, there's often a very romantic and idealized notion of what a relationship should be, which doesn't account for the hard work involved, because really good relationships are really hard work. There's a yearning for perfection in the partner and in the partnership itself. It means that you might actually be a very difficult person to live with during this transit, because you're going to want something to be a certain way. And there is going to be this focus on perfection, and you don't even realize you're doing it. You're not even going to realize you're doing it. Unconsciously, you can be extremely critical and judge flaws in the other person, which doesn't match up to your concept of what your partner ought to be like, or fails to match your notion of love. I mean, you may present the facade of a perfect relationship to your friends, to your family, to everybody out in public, when in fact it's very far from ideal. Now, more positively, there may be a spiritual meeting between you and a partner and an uncanny psychic rapport between the two of you. But no matter how divinely ordained that union might seem, there is still the need to adjust to the differences elicited by personal idiosyncrasies, right? And realizing that you guys may not be as alike as you would really like. You know, two soulmates can still argue about how the other person doesn't clean up, or how they squeeze the toothpaste, or how they put something away, whatever it is. Now, after we strip away the fantasy and the glamour and the romantic notions of love, what does Neptune leave you here? Ultimately, this planet represents a non-attached kind of love, a love that does not cling or swallow up any of the people involved. It's not a union based on oughts and shoulds, but one of reciprocity where both people are being respected. Now, besides just referring to marriage and close partnerships, this energy indicates a way in which you meet society in general, including not only your boss, but including the public, including clients, right? So you can encounter others from a stance of love, sensitivity, and openness, or present a false front, which suits any occasion, just for the job. You're able to put the face on, right? A lot of artists and musicians have this energy as well. But if Neptune is difficultly aspected here, there can be a danger of scandal and problems and public lawsuits. You can find yourself being scapegoated, that is, openly punished for what others secretly feel guilty about in themselves. So you do want to be mindful of that, especially if you're being blamed for things within a relationship, my friends. Okay, that is what I have for you, Libra. Thank you so much for hanging with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Hi, Virgo. Let's unpack this eighth house Neptune placement. So here for you guys, Neptune in the eighth, sex is going to be a way of merging with other people. Let's just start with that, thereby transcending the limits of the isolated self. So really, I was wanting to just like kind of combined. So either through losing your own boundaries or engulfing those of another, you relieve much more than just physiological tension, right? Sex is also a way of loosening the reins of personal control and responsibility for the self. So you can easily become captured and captivated by another. You are carried away by a force more powerful than yourself, and you love that. You're going to be very open to that. It's a form of worship and reverence, a kind of design seduction, which brings home to you that is something that exists, which is bigger and greater than you are, through the energy of sharing it with another person. Now, this is whether you're with somebody right now or not. This is absolutely going to be a sponge for this kind of energy. Now, with Neptune in the eighth, physical intimacy is also a respite for loneliness, as much as promiscuity and indiscretion is associated with this particular transit. So you may also feel that giving yourself sexually is a way of serving or pleasing or even healing others. It could be a very convenient way of escaping from problems and problems in life, in other areas of life. It's common for a lot of people with this kind of transit to be confused about their sexual identities and what it is that they want. Now, I don't necessarily mean, are you gay, are you not gay, you straight, whatever, but it could also just be like your general understanding of sex in general in your life. Neptune is so diffuse, so adaptable, so fluid, and so shaped by its container that you may have difficulty knowing exactly what it is that you want, right? You might not even want to have sex. You might just really want the friendship, but it's like, can I just have the friendship and kind of have everything else, but not, you know what I'm saying? So there could be some confusion about that. Um, Conversely, problematic aspects to Neptune also can suggest a fear of letting go, right? A tension between holding on to boundaries and losing them. On the one hand, you may even feel the need to transcend your, those libido kind of desires altogether for the sake of channeling your energy in another direction. Like I have to shut down that part of myself because I have to do this, right? On the other hand, again, sex may even seem like a disappointment, right? Where it's just like not quite as wonderful as it looks like in your mind's eye or in the movies or what you're reading in books or whatever it is. And then it's like, if it's not so great, why even bother with it? It's like, why bother? Um, And still, though, you may feel that your way of purification and redemption is through sacrificing a sexual relationship with someone to whom you are strongly attracted, right? If that happens to be in your space. Now, a lot of times, in many cases, this placement seems to always desire and fantasize about people that they are not involved with, right? So you could find yourself in that space. And the thing is this could even be going on if you're with somebody. So you might be fantasizing about somebody else rather than the person to whom you are engaged with currently, right? In that relationship. Because Neptune is never like in the eighth house, Neptune is never really content with what he already has there, right? And besides, if you know a person too well, or that familiarity breeds contempt, that kind of sensibility, so the boredom for a partner. And I hate to say it like that, that sounds so callous. You could even still love them very deeply, but find like that whole intimacy realm and just connecting with them closely. It's just not something that you're going to feel likely very, very motivated to do straight out of the gate, unless it's something that has payoff that's very ethereal and romantic and satisfying, right? So, and this even applies to the exchange of values between you and someone else, often you can hope to gain many material benefits from a partner. And because it's the eighth house, you could even hope to gain many material benefits from a legal situation, from a lawsuit, financial help from somebody, because the eighth house is all about somebody else's money. It's also financial payouts for legal situations or insurance settlements, anything like that. So hoping from that, but then ultimately what is acquired is usually of a much less tangible nature or much less than you thought. And it could also be like strange complications and deceptive circumstances around partners' money, around joint finances, around legal situations. And this is a very long transit. So the weight of it is really going to depend on what's going on in your eighth house in your natal chart. At times you may be too influenced or even deceived by other people's values, or envious about what others own, which you don't, or, that can happen here. But, at the end of the day, your greatest satisfaction comes from not from accruing other people's possessions, really, but by helping another person to develop his or her own values and resources, and to be that person who is the backbone, who is the support. That's where that Neptunian benefit is going to really come from. Now, it's absolutely advisable that anyone with this transit be as straightforward as possible, having to do with any business dealings, anything having to do with business partners, investments, debt, taxes, anything connected to the stock market. Neptune often brings confusion, and when signing contracts, the two parties should clarify exactly what the agreement is. Because economic losses and gains will have really an important psychological impact, and ultimately it could impel you to find that the security and salvation inwardly in values other than material, right? You're just going to realize, like, it's not all about money. It's just like I have to look beyond that. And regardless, you're well advised to seek advice before making any sort of financial investments, anything concerning like inheritance, again, taxation, anything like that. Don't gamble, not with Neptune in the house. It's not worth it. Okay, my friends? All right. Thank you so much for hanging with me. I'll see you guys next time. Hi, Leo. Let's talk about this Neptune energy in your ninth house. Now, Neptune here seeks redemption and salvation through a belief system. This season, meaning this 14-year transit, you will yearn to merge with something greater than yourself through devotional adherence to a philosophy, to religion, to some sort of very strict belief system. There is also an irresistible attraction to anyone or anything, which promises the keys to healing. Anything like that. Normally, your philosophy or religion will require some form of sacrifice or relinquishment, like giving something up of either your ego or your possessions, your former attachments, or your belief system. Now, the ninth house does also have to do with politics, laws, legalities, local governance. It's the manifestation of father energy. It is foreign land, foreign travel, higher education, higher mindedness, negotiating, anything having to do with advertising, marketing, launching, getting something out there, right? So again, something will have to be either sacrificed or relinquished in this space. And a lot of people with this transit benefit enormously from really good doctrines, right? You know, where there's a set belief system. There's a set avenue of faith. Now, some of you may even find yourself joining some sort of strange esoteric or cultish group and you lose yourself through the involvements there. Or some may believe that enlightenment will come if you perfectly imitate, a guru, or you can easily fall victim to what is known as the Buddha disease, right? Where you're like dressing and eating and thinking exactly like the master and forgetting the importance of just being yourself. You can easily mistake believing that if you behave like an enlightened being, you will become enlightened, forgetting that behavior is a byproduct of consciousness and not the other way around, and really leaning into religion, but with a very not occultish mentality or sheep-like mentality, but really understanding the core of the belief system. So you can easily mood shift yourself into believing that you're fully realized in this energy. Because remember, Neptune is very foggy. And hard aspects to this placement, especially like a square from that 12th house, can suggest the possibility of like spiritual inflation. Someone who believes that, you know, like the individual, like that you are like not equivalent to God, but that you understand everything, right? And that there's some sort of monopoly on the truth. And you could feel like you have some sort of monopoly on the truth when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, when it comes to dealing with a foreign land, a foreign entity, dealing with any sort of higher mindedness. So we do have to be careful there. Now, with Neptune here, there is a possibility of disappointment with your philosophical system. So if you're looking for that one thing, which will be the answer to everything, then you're liable to feel very disillusioned, right? Where throw all your eggs into one basket, right? You want to be careful here because in general, with Neptune here, pinning the hopes on anything external from self in the ninth house, even if it's very inspired philosophy or belief system, can incite feeling let down until what's actually being sought externally is found within. So it's getting very square right within yourself about your own belief system, your own moral code, your own moral compass. Now, this placement tells me that you are going into a season where you have a very open and a very impressionable mind, a very vivid imagination, and an interest in what Maslow called the farther reaches of human nature, right? You could sense much more than you already are, right? You're really going to be expanding yourself and developing different faculties and finding different like sleeping potentials within your own energy. Now, you may be confused about what direction to take, maybe in higher education or your politics or your belief system, whatever it is. Because there can be this vagueness, right? This vacillation about what do I do? It could even be with a higher education. What subject do I teach? What do I really want? What do I really believe? And some might even believe that, education is the answer to everything, right? But then you might find that guru at the head of your classroom. You just have to be, you're very susceptible to guru type of energy, right? In this kind of situation. But then you're gonna if you attach guru label to anybody, they will disappoint you, right? There will be a disillusionment. You need to be disillusioned because the very thing that you're looking toward the guru for, Neptune really does want you to find it within yourself. Now, you can experience so much creative expression that could easily be inspired by religious or transcendental images or subtle dimensions of experience. And you could even serve as a channel to awaken these in others, especially in the ninth house. So, you could be a wise person, a wise voice, but you want to balance it out that just because you're wise doesn't mean that you know everything, right? We do want to make sure that we're balancing out this Neptunian energy. But Neptune will express itself in relation to travel and long journeys as well in the ninth house. For some, travel will be a means of escape and a way of avoiding something in the immediate environment. Others may make pilgrimages, especially in the ninth house. That's where God speaks to us to find enlightenment or be drawn to certain lands which have a very like Mecca-like enchantment for you. You might even envision a place and go there and find it very different than what you imagined. That could be for good or for challenging, right? It's just very different there. You may feel a kind of spiritual tie with the country other than your own during this transit. Caution should be taken not to be deceived by others while in foreign countries. Do be super careful. If Neptune is difficultly aspected, there could be complications with in-laws during this time, or the feeling of this idea of feeling like a responsibility. There could be complications with that idea. And because it's a manifestation of father energy, like this idea of responsibility of father energy could be something that you're looking at. It could be of yourself as a father, or it could just be like your own father energy or father-in-law energy. This idea of feeling responsible. This could certainly be something that needs to be unpacked during this transit. But that is what I have for you, my friends. I hope this was helpful. I will see you guys next time. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, Cancer, Neptune in the 10th house has many different faces in that energy. This is a place, a career, standing before the public, long-term goals, status of your marriage. Now one manifestation of Neptune here can be that you find yourself idealized and worshipped by others and or the public in general, where in some way you capture the collective imagination or come to represent a movement or a force sweeping through society. This placement can embody various principles, anything from representing what's beautiful, stylish, and glamorous to the outcast, as well as the public scandal. However, foggy Neptune here can indicate vagueness or confusion about which career to pursue. You may be dissatisfied with work if it is not felt as all-absorbing and really inspirational. And I've said that a lot of times for you guys, Cancer, right? You have to really like the journey you're on, where it is that you work, what it is that you're doing. You have to have a real belief in it, right? I've worked with so many people who've like devotedly connected themselves to work and in return for far less recognition or, being treated in ways that they really don't deserve. Now, on the other hand, you may feel that your salvation depends on finding the right work or serving the needs of others, right? At some point, you may be forced to give up your career because of a greater influence over which you have no control. Right? Now, 10th house, I do want to say, is also the manifestation of mother energy, right? So there could be something going on with mother. I don't want any of you to get worried about that, but something could be happening for good or for challenging in the life of mother that ultimately ends up impacting the career that you're on, that you're in, or the path that you're taking. Now, your mother will probably also carry some sort of Neptunian projection. She might be seen as a martyr or a victim on the one hand, right? Someone who gave up her own identity for the sake of raising you and the family and all of that. Maybe your mother has a very artistic or creative potential that was cut short for some reasons, and you may felt guilty about that. Or you may feel guilty about feeling happy if your mother's frustrated and unfulfilled. You could feel guilty around mother energy, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be because she's doing anything particular. It could just be the way that you're understanding it. Or your mother ends up being so like sensitive and delicate that you end up having to mother your own mother at a certain point, right? Now, with Neptune in that space, which is the sign of the nurse, that could certainly happen. Although the desire to serve reflects a purpose in itself, you may find a connection between your choice of a service vocation right, during this transit, and experiences with your mother during childhood. So you might be choosing to get in something having to do with a career because of your experiences with your mother. Now, on the other hand, a parent may be seen as a savior or a redeemer or someone so idealized that you feel unworthy to live up to that person's image. Maybe Neptune asked that your mother be let go of and sacrificed for a number of reasons. And if your mother leaves, is ill, or is just working so much that you guys don't have the same connection, you're being made to give up your mother, at least in her physical form, right? Um, and that's obviously will have its own set of challenges. I mean, you guys and those with Neptune in the ninth house, it's the manifestation of father energy and mother energy, and it could certainly manifest. Now, it doesn't have to mean passing away. This could just certainly be needing to give them up in the same way. So depending on where you're at, maybe you have to move away, or maybe her career is taking a completely different turn, and the dynamic that once was is going to be changing. That doesn't have to be for a bad thing. This could be a good thing. It just could just be part of the evolutionary process. But it is this idea of needing to give something up, right? Um, that kind of energy there, right? Again, this idea of a victim and sacrifice, connected to the career, but also having to do with the path that you're walking on in your life. So there could be some confusion, but you have to understand that this is just a transit, that the confusion that you're going to be feeling now is necessary for you to have the clarity later on. And Saturn will be going in there in the summer for 3 months. Then he's going to dip back out into Pisces for 6 months. But then he's going to dip back in to Aries with that Neptune energy for the next 3 years after that. So I don't want you to get too sucked down the rabbit hole. If you're feeling confused about your career, or if something's going on with mom, if there's some sort of transition going on there, everything is going to sort of settle in once that Saturn energy moves in there to help out. Okay, my friends, that is what I have for you. I hope that was helpful. See you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, Gem, Neptune in the 11th. The underdog, the underdog, the underdog. You're going to be just a bleeding heart for the underdog. If some segment of the population is suffering or mistreated, you are likely going to be feeling this so deeply as if it's happening to you. And you guys are a sensitive bunch to begin with. We don't typically refer to you guys as that, but you are. But you're going to be feeling that kind of energy really, like deeply. During this transit, though, as well, at some point during this transit, you will likely be attracted to secret groups, some sort of secret, I don't want to say a cult because it's not really a cult energy I'm getting, artistic groups, spiritual groups, some sort of psychic circles, even. Now, if Neptune does go through, some sort of hard aspects, the group may have good ideals and intentions, but somehow they never fully bring them to manifestation. So you just want to be really mindful of who it is when it comes to group work, group settings, friends that you're making. I'm not saying don't, but just be careful that that everybody's on the same page, right? And everybody's like living in reality, for lack of a better term. Now, the main thrust of Neptune in the 11th is to abandon the self to the group. So at some point, you may look to a particular group, or I guess we could say even cult, as a means to redeem yourself, to experience salvation and make sacrifices for the sake of the group. If you are less politically minded, group activities may simply be a way of escaping from the more mundane routines of your life. Like you can lose yourself in a social whirlwind, or, seeking glamorous friends or parties, or going to the local bar, may even just be the extent of your group involvement. But it's just this idea of seeking out other people to be involved, right? Now, well-aspected Neptune energy, friends will be supportive. They're going to be very caring. Likewise, you will usually be there to help out other people, especially people who are having any kind of difficulty. But you want to just be careful of the disillusionment and deception through friendships, right? Because that's Neptune is about disillusionment and deception. And the 11th house is friends. It's also older siblings. It's also stepchildren, grandchildren, daughter-in-law, and son-in-law. So you can easily feel that your ideals of friendship, or even within those said relationships, are betrayed. And you may feel at times subtle manipulation. You may feel that subtle manipulation of a friend. Where they're trying to get you to feel sorry for them. So, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. But so discrimination should be exercised in, choosing the right friends, choosing the right groups that you're going to be hanging out with. It's very easy with Neptune here to really kind of abdicate personal responsibilities if influenced by a bad crowd, right? Saying it wasn't my fault, it was that, because friends can carry like a very Neptunian projection. You have to be careful that they're not like the alcoholics, right? Artists are great, healers are great, romantic dream is cool. People who are simply offbeat, that very Aquarian 11th house, great, but you want to be careful that you're not really delving into too much of the people who are doing self-sabotaging things, and that you end up in that nexus. You have to be careful of that. Also, because the 11th house is goals and gains, you may ultimately find yourself chasing a goal constantly, which constantly eludes you, or you may be even set up a pattern of wanting things that it's just impossible to have, right? Where you're just not making these plans within the scope of reality. And again, through confronting disillusionment and Neptune's energy, you are made aware of your limitations and reminded that something greater than all of us exists, which is, kind of running the show, right? At the end of the day, there is this lot. I mean, we have choice in how we engage with the energies, but we're not the ones who are actually running the energies. Whatever it is, it's just advisable that you offset the tendency to be vague and vacillating about your direction in life by defining your goals as clearly and as realistically as possible, guys. And with that Pluto energy in the ninth house, Pluto wants you to grow there. He wants you to publish. He wants you to market. He wants you to negotiate. He wants you to travel. He wants you to do those things. And in that sextile, you have the energy. It's up to you to actually make it happen for yourself. Okay, my friends? Just be careful of those Neptune energies, and I hope that helped in some way. Thanks for hanging with me. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. Okay, Taurus. So you have that Neptune energy in the 12th house. Neptune is so strong in his own house. He's in domicile in the 12th, where the very best or the very worst of the qualities can absolutely this planet can absolutely manifest. You are highly sensitive to undercurrents, movements, and unseen forces in the atmosphere. Sometimes during this transit, you're going to be more aware of these levels than when it's actually happening on the surface level of life. At times, your uncanny vision is going to be super confusing. You see or are told one thing and yet feel or sense something very different is happening. So definitely trust your spidey senses here. Now, you may feel victimized by your own unconscious, that is, periodically swamped or overwhelmed by emotions and feelings which others have an easier time keeping at bay. So this can manifest a couple different ways. You might experience where you just feel like your ego boundaries are like gone. They're just shot. They're dissolving. Or your ordinary perspective of life suddenly shifts out of focus, and you're like, what is it all about anyway? Some of you might even see this as just a mystical experience, but for others, the experience can be accompanied by disarming and really frightening sensations of chaos and invasion and bad dreams. Remember, the 12th house is it's where we sleep, it's our dreams. Very connected to the part of our past that we have not yet healed. It does look at how we've ended various things in our life. So Neptune can tend to bring these things up. Now, Neptune can also denote very strong escapist tendencies here. I'm not even going to lie. Daydreams or fantasies can swallow you whole. You might retreat from life by creating your own little world in which to live. Most of you with displacement, this is going to be for a lot of you a time of seclusion, and withdrawal may be necessary in order to center yourself and sort of cleanse yourself from the psychic fog, right? That and dirt, like the psychic like sandstorm, right, of other people, which, have probably been absorbed in your energy and accumulated from your interactions with other people. But you could certainly suffer because the world in this Neptune in the 12th, the world does not live up to your expectations of what it could be. And while you're hurt by the lack of beauty in the world, it's possible that your sensitivity to beauty can be a means of your own self-healing, right? Where beauty has it's very connected to regeneration when it comes to the psyche. So if you can make time in your life to really watch and study things that are beautiful, like a sunset, or linger by the sea, sit out on a night where the stars are visible. I know these all seem very rote and rudimentary, but there's a lot of power here. You can, often revitalize your own psyche, just taking those breaks out away. And especially by water, though. Water is very good for you here. Now, performing service is another way of freeing the self from the pain and unhappiness that you might be feeling while reestablishing the meaning of life again. Some common sense is required here, though, right? I mean, some of you may throw yourself totally into other people's lives as a way of avoiding your own. Nonetheless, Neptune in the 12th here could do really effective work within hospitals or institutions. This is excellent for those of you who are like nurses, anything having to do with that. If you work in a prison, museum, library, art gallery, anything like that, because those places also protect and preserve wisdom and beauty. So anything that's connected to preserving wisdom and beauty, past and present, is really, really nice there as well. Very good for creativity, though, guys. So if you, depending on what else is in your chart, if you happen to be a writer or an artist or anything like that, when Neptune is in domicile, there could be a lot of creative outlets that are tapped into. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so let's talk about the Neptune retrograde themes. So I'm just going to talk about some themes. I'm not going to go deeper than that. Things, if you have Neptune retrograde, everybody's Neptune is going to be, shaken. But it's difficult to understand. If you have Neptune retrograde, you're going to be pushed to really look at those retrograde energies. So first of all, Neptune already has an intuitive expression. So when it's retrograde, it can cause you to suppress your spiritual side. That's going to be challenged. You may tend to live in the land of make-believe, right? In other words, you go through bouts of being disconnected from reality and escaping through daydreams. That's going to be challenged. Neptune retrograde can cause you to feel blurry and have a hard time deciphering fact from belief. That will be challenged. Neptune natal retrograde could cause you to feel lethargic. So you could feel sluggish at times when it comes down to taking action, right? So you can have analysis paralysis. You're going to be pushed past that. Enmeshment in relationships could be an ongoing issue until you break that pattern. That Neptune energy is going to want you to really look at any tendency for enmeshment. You could go through extremes with your sleep, having cinematic dreams or a lack of imagination. This Neptune energy is just going to exacerbate that a little bit. Okay, so just understand that. You could be overly sacrificing and deny yourself comfort or compassion for the sake of helping other people. You have to show yourself compassion now. It's in Aries. Aries wants to have that compassion put upon himself, right? There could be a tendency to deny your own reality and of others do the same through gaslighting. So know thyself. If you know that you gaslight, you have to really call yourself out on that. There could be moments of stagnation and creativity where you have trouble accessing your imagination. Just be patient with that. Be patient with that. It will get better, okay? Checking out of responsibilities when you don't want to deal with the hard stuff in life. So escapism could be an issue. Hold yourself accountable. It's a really good way of just practicing in little ways, little ways. There could be problems with empathy that come up with this kind of retrograde, but you go from extremes of having an overabundance of compassion for people to a lack where you just really don't care about them. So you want to try to find a really nice balance there. It's just a new way of life. Hypochondria tends to come up a lot with this retrograde planet. So you're best off just going to the doctor, getting baselines and everything, and just not thinking too much about it. Regarding faith, there can be a lot of doubt in yourself, humanity, and religion. Being more, developing more clarity in that part of your life. It's very important, regardless of what it is. I'm not telling you what to believe, but believe in something, okay? Yeah, and there is also a tendency, there will be a tendency to fall into, well, if you have this retrograde in your chart, there is a tendency to fall into the victim mentality or be victimized by others. Boundaries, really, really important here. Eventually, you can be an amazing healer, musician, poet, actor, actress, singer, writer, artist, astrologer, and psychic. All great, with Neptune being challenged in that retrograde status. So if you've had those on your heart to do over the next 2 years, kind of pulling yourself out of this space is a good time to do it. So, and really being very mindful of not meeting people who have bad intentions or who ultimately end up taking advantage of you, right? Drawing the line in the sand with that, right? That's definitely going to be something that you're going to be looking at over the next 2 years. Okay, my friends. So I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.